Did you know that 39% of Americans believe in ghosts? I'm going to give you a second to think about this for a second. But do you believe that's true or not? Well, maybe you believe it's true or not. But if you do believe it's true, why do you believe it's true? Is it because I said it? Is it because you just sort of mystically came up with that yourself? Or maybe in the few seconds we've been together, you Google searched it. But this is information which, by the way, is true within 3% margin of error. But you've got to ask yourself, how do you know what's real and what's not? Everybody out there will tell you they've got a study to show this or that. And a lot of times those studies are conflicting, and not just in the social sciences, in the hard sciences as well. The tools we're going to go over this week hopefully will make you a better consumer of that information. And if you follow what I'm saying and you find anything of interest here with the materials that I'm presenting, I can also help you find a really good paying job if you learn those methods a little bit better. And believe it or not, I do think methods actually can be a little bit of fun if you just let your guard down, and hopefully you'll see what I mean by the end of this lecture. Social detectives. There are three concepts that are essential to any scientific study, whether it's in sociology, psychology, physics, or any other area that calls themselves a science. And they are theories, hypotheses, and variables. I'm sure all of you have heard that at some point in your academic career. They are the backbone of all scientific inquiry. Theories provide the overarching framework to tell you what to study in the first place. Hypotheses give you specific testable predictions. And variables transform abstract ideas into something we can actually measure. So let's look at an example of stress and well-being. I think most of us have heard this, and common sense would say people who are more stressed have more negative well-being, or they feel worse. So our hypothesis for taking that general idea might be transformed into something like an increase in negative life events, the independent variable, will cause an increase in psychological distress, the dependent variable. We would then need to operationalize, that is, convert our negative life events into something we can actually measure. Say, for instance, counting divorces, job losses, problems in school, and so forth, and psychological distress. Maybe we'll measure that using a standardized survey scale of distress, such as depression, anxiety, and so forth. Have you ever been asked to take part in a survey and wondered why you were chosen? It's all about getting a snapshot of the bigger picture without having to talk to everyone. And believe it or not, it does work. Gobs of research shows that you can take a smaller sample if it's done well and represent a larger group. And that's why we need to talk a few minutes about sampling, because sociologists want to apply what we study in social psychology to everyone. Psychology has a tendency to focus on small groups of people and do experiments. We'll talk more about that later. But that group of 30 people in that experiment are not meant to represent all humans, the billions of people that live on the planet. Sociologists tend to do surveys, and we tend to like to do surveys because with 1,000 people, we can say within plus or minus 3% whether it reflects the entire American population of some 300 million people. There are different types of samples. There are probability samples, those that are randomly selected, and non-probability samples, or convenience samples, also called snowball samples. They each have their place in the social sciences. Probability samples are essential if we want to take our sample and apply it to the rest of the human population. These are very expensive and hard to come by, which is why we don't always do them. But there are reasons to do non-probability samples other than it's cheaper and we may not be able to afford a probability sample. For instance, there might be populations that are almost impossible to study using probability techniques. The classic example are drug dealers. It's hard to get a random sample of drug dealers, to be quite frank. The snowball technique is even easier. It's like asking one or two people you know, will you participate? And then you ask them if they know other people who are willing to do it. So once again, the people who are drug users or if they're selling drugs, you might start with one or two people that you find, however you find them, and then ask them for help finding other people because they probably know that people like them. Reliability and validity are two cornerstones of good scientific research. Reliability ensures that our measurements are consistent, giving us confidence that our results aren't just random fluctuations. Validity, on the other hand, ensures that we're actually measuring what we set out to measure, preventing us from making false conclusions. The reason I stop and talk about this with you right now is that, and if you don't know it, in the field of psychology, there's something called a replication crisis going on. It refers to a growing evidence that many classic and even recent psychological studies fail to replicate, meaning that when other researchers try to repeat the same experiment, they often get different results. So why is this important for validity and reliability? Because measures in social psychology, both in sociology and psychology, are not hard. They're not like rocks. They're not even like cells. They're hypothetical in many cases, and we don't have physical representations of them. So it's essential when you hear studies about human beings that you question, how did they measure this and how they measure that? And that's why throughout the semester I will occasionally bring in these kind of measurements so you can decide whether or not you can trust the study as being valid and reliable. If this were a traditional research methods class, we'd spend at least one class period talking about research ethics. There are dozens of studies out there that have been done that are questionable. The people in the studies either got harmed physically or mentally, or there was some dishonesty involved in one way or another. Regardless, we've reached a point in the world in which if you're at a university, a large organization, and the government, in which if you wanted to collect data on people, you'd have a group called the Institutional Review Board who would review your methods to ensure that they're ethical and that minimizes harm to people, again, physically or mentally. Qualitative research excels in uncovering nuanced meanings and experiences, providing rich contextual detail on relationships and what people are thinking and feeling at any particular time. Quantitative research, on the other hand, is powerful for identifying patterns and measuring relationships. They also give us the ability to generalize to whole populations. Sociologists do research under both of these rubrics. Other fields like anthropology tends to focus on qualitative methods, whereas psychology tends to focus on quantitative. In sociology, we tend to do both. I want to start with qualitative methods. I've come to believe in my career qualitative methods are one of the more cool things that you can do, and you can do it right away. I'm hoping to convince you in the next minute or two that qualitative methods are very important and that all researchers should be ready to utilize them in one way or another. Qualitative methods are incredibly valuable for gaining a rich, nuanced understanding of social phenomena. They allow researchers to immerse themselves in real-world settings, to capture lived experiences and uncover subtle complexities of human interaction that might be missed with numbers alone. These methods are particularly powerful for exploring new topics, studying things that would be difficult to do using quantitative means, and providing contextual depth to quantitative findings. Let me pick those one at a time. Studying new topics. What if you wanted to study the role of AI in people's lives? Well, you might be really into AI, but to be quite frank, AI has not been infused into the American culture as of 2 or 3 years ago. So it's a fairly new thing. So you can't go by your experiences with AI to go out and survey the population and ask what they're doing. Rather, you might want to talk to your friends first, or use a convenient sample of people and ask them how they use AI, how it's in their life, and then create a survey with that. Secondly, in terms of studying things that would be difficult to study in a quantitative way, I used the example earlier of trying to study drug dealers. It would be hard enough to get a sample of drug dealers to do a sample survey of them, but to be quite frank, chances are they're not going to want to answer a survey anyway. I think a qualitative study would probably be best for a population like that. But think of any other population. Let's say you want to look at murderers or people who do child pornography or something like that. It's going to be very hard to get those people to fill out surveys. And finally, providing some depth to quantitative findings. Let's say you do go out and do a survey of people and ask them questions, say, about mental health. and you find that there's a certain type of stressor that seems to impact depression more than others. So maybe take some time and unpack that with an individual and ask them specifically how a particular stress is causing depression with them, because the numbers are just going to be very vague. They're not going to get at that level of detail. In my experience doing methods over the last 20 years, I found a big divide between people who do qualitative research and people who do quantitative research. And that's because to do any science as we think of it today, it has to be in the form of a number. That is, if we want to do any kind of statistical testing, we have to convert it to a number and put it into a formula. So quantitative research essentially helps us to identify patterns and test specific hypotheses and help us determine cause and effect in relationships. We really can't do that with qualitative research. We've already reviewed what qualitative research gives us that quantitative can't, but the superpower that quantitative methods give us is the scientific method. It also gives us the ability to get at cause and effect, and also allows us to look at large populations and extrapolate to the data to that larger population. I tell my research methods students all the time, the reason surveys go for a random sample of 1,000 respondents is that a random sample of 1,000 responses gives us a plus or minus 3% margin of error, and that's considered acceptable in the scientific community. So the assumption is it is 1,000 people randomly selected. Make sure when you look at those studies that come to you that when they say 1,000 that they're randomly selected. If they're not randomly selected, then you have to question the validity of that study. If you're a psychology or a sociology student, chances are you're going to take some kind of research method before you graduate. That methods course will depend on what field you're in. If you're in psychology, you'll probably be focusing on research experiments. In sociology, you're going to learn about experiments, but you're also going to learn how to do a really good survey, an observation study or a field study or ethnography, and a qualitative interviewing. But both fields, you're going to have to learn how to do a research report. This almost always starts with what is your theoretical orientation that you're bringing into the study. You're going to do a literature review of what other people have studied who are studying the same thing that you are. You're going to have to develop research questions and an hypothesis. You're going to pick a method. In psychology, it's a little less broad than sociology, but pick a method and then talk about how you're going to actually conduct that study. And then you're going to have to go study it. And ultimately, you have to report those results. And almost always that means somebody's going to have to review it, whether it be a professor, a group of peers, or a national organization who review it and decide whether or not this study, the methods are good enough to be presented in a public hearing or published into a journal. Ultimately, scholars want to get into journals like Social Psychology Quarterly, which comes out in sociology 4 times a year. And then we have the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology and Psychology. Both of these journals, only the top articles come out every year. And we're talking less than 10% of those people who submit articles get them accepted. So what exactly can you do with research methods? As I said earlier, there are whole careers as social scientists, and you can certainly do that. And one or more of the methods we reviewed are the kind of things people get paid to do every day. But I think research methods really can be fun. And on a regular basis when I go around the country and I'm traveling for different reasons, I like to stop and talk to people, and I ask if I can record them and take pictures because I like to share their story with other people. It gives us some depth of understanding of the human person, how and why we do the things that we do. So don't be afraid to find a method that you find interesting and just start collecting information. I think you'll find that it's exciting and interesting, and you'll see the world in a very different way.